And now, from the Room 111 studios, it's Hacking Engagement with James Sturdivant.
Hey there, listener. Welcome back to the Hacking Engagement podcast. I'm so glad you're here. And it's been a little while. Man, I've been busy. I've been really busy. My daughter got married in mid-July, so our family was pretty preoccupied during the month. But I've had a great summer. I've been working out. I've been eating great. I've been doing lots of home improvement projects. And interestingly enough, this fall, my lovely wife will be in my class. She's going to be in my technology class. She needs some credits for recertification, so she's taking my education technology class. Hallelujah. She better behave herself, man. Or maybe she'll misbehave on purpose. Okay, enough of that nonsense. I'm really excited about this episode. And in introducing this episode, I want you to imagine a high school girl from Texas deciding to venture to Denmark as an exchange student. Now that would be a culture shock and a climate shock. And I'm describing my guest, the young Jennifer Burke-Hansen. What's interesting about Jennifer is that she became so enchanted with this tiny nation of just 6 million people on the scenic Jutland Peninsula in Northern Europe. So much so that she's resided there for the past 3 decades, and she's taught high school for the bulk of her stay. So she's a high school teacher from Denmark. I mean, Texas has 29 million people. So where she moved to is only a fraction of the size of the state where she was from. Now, Jennifer embodies the growth mindset. She continually pushes herself outside her comfort zone like she did as a high school student, which led to her wonderful life in Europe. Teaching school is hard enough in your hometown, but imagine teaching in a different culture where the students don't even speak your native language. That's the kind of person Jennifer is. She's a pioneer, man. She's got a growth mindset, big time, which I really admire. Now, the challenge for returning to in-person instruction this fall may be making you anxious, maybe making a lot of teachers anxious. Jennifer's here to help. She's offering a free training entitled How to Create Your Personalized Back-to-School reEntry Plan. Just click on the link in the show notes for access. There's also a post from her reEnchanting teaching blog. This post is titled Redefine Your Normal. I love this idea. And we talk about teaching in the post-COVID world a lot in this episode. I also love the theme of her blog, reEnchanting Teaching. I was a successful teacher, but there were seasons in my career where I had doubts. This blog addresses questioning educators. You're not alone. And Jennifer's here to help. And speaking of show notes, and speaking of links on show notes, I always tell you guys to do that. And maybe I'm not clear enough on where to get those. If you just look up James Sturdivant on Google, you'll find a link to my site. Or you can go to jamesallensturdivant.com, and Allen is spelled A-L-A-N. Hallelujah. That's interesting. Hey, this is a great episode. It's a timely episode. Jennifer starts school tomorrow, my gosh, it's coming, man. So give a listen, check out the links. I think you're going to find this is right up your alley. Buckle up, man. You're going to love this episode. Here's my elevator pitch for my brand new book, Teaching in Magenta. This book provides 100 ways to create a magnificent day in your classroom. Once you start stringing some magenta days together, you and your students will experience profound well-being and deep joy. That's Teaching in Magenta, which is now available on Amazon's virtual shelves. So here we are in the Room 111 studios, and man, it's just gorgeous in the state of Ohio today. It's a late summer day. temperatures in the mid-80s, and I'm going to an exotic place. I'm going to go six time zones away and talk to a new friend. Her name is Jennifer Burke-Hansen. Please say hello.
Hello, James. Thank you for having me here.
No problem. And tell the audience where you live.
I live in Denmark.
Denmark.
Yeah, I know that sounds really far away, but I'm a Texan at heart. So
I was gonna say you
I belong to Texas, but my life is in Denmark.
I mean, you definitely sound like you're from these parts. How's that? You don't sound European, but you sound like an American who lives in Europe, which is exactly what you are.
Exactly.
Do you have Danish citizenship?
That's funny you asked, because I just got that in March after being here for, let's just say 36 years, I think it is now.
Wow.
But, I finally got my citizenship.
So you've been a teacher a long time.
I have been a teacher for more than 25 years.
I was going to say 36 years living in Denmark. That's incredible. Now, I have to ask you this question. How far do you live from the Baltic Sea?
Well, from the sea, I just, I'm 5 minutes away if I want to go to the beach.
Whoo! So, does the Baltic Sea ever get warm enough to actually enjoy swimming in it?
Well, that depends on who you really ask. If you ask
that sounds like no.
But if you ask someone who grew up going into the Gulf of Mexico, I would say it's, I've only been in the water actually 3 times since I've lived here, but that's probably more my fear of the water than it is of the temperature.
But it had to be cold.
It is so cold.
Doesn't it freeze for like part of the year?
Not quite. It used to. There used to be years when it would freeze, but I think global warming is catching up also to Denmark.
Ooh,
so
I'll tell you what. I jumped in Lake Michigan one time in August, and I thought I was going to die. It was so damn cold, and it was a hot day. Now, I looked at your weather. You have some nice weather right now. It's like sunny, 70s, right?
Oh, it's beautiful weather these days. But, it's Denmark. It can change. It can be really hot, actually, in the summer. It can be, around, I'm going to use Celsius because that's how I roll these days, 29, 30 every once in a while.
Right.
But for the most part, we've got really nice weather, which is in the low 20s. So,
you know something, I think what you just said is interesting because Americans are so provincial, and we have this ridiculous system of measurements that when I was in high school, we were embracing the metric system, and then we got all nationalistic and said, screw that. It's ridiculous.
Yeah. Well, I can't, I still think when I think of measurements, I think in feet and inches.
Yeah.
And not in centimeters or meters.
Huh.
But almost all my other measurements are now go to a metric system.
Very good, man. Well, I'm off my soapbox now. So explain to the audience how in the world a teacher from Denmark and a teacher from Ohio started interacting. How did our paths cross?
Well, James, you're an expert at PowerPoint. and I love using PowerPoint, and I ran across a presentation that you did at one time, and I was really fascinated about using fewer words and more pictures in PowerPoint, and that kind of really sparked my interest because I was getting a little bit tired of my own wall of text on my PowerPoint.
Right.
So I took a course that you had. It's just a real small, 30-minute course, and I couldn't figure it out. So
must be the teacher.
I couldn't. I was pushing all the buttons. I was trying to do all the things, and you were so kind as to offer to do a Zoom call to help me out. And it didn't really help because I had the wrong version of PowerPoint.
Yeah, you know what? Sometimes you put something out there and there's a glitch that just messes everything up, and then you're like, why is this not working? So, did you ever get it resolved?
I did. I finally got a new version installed, and as soon as I did that, I had the talking head.
Yeah.
I did the videos, and I'm not going to say I'm a pro because that would be maybe a little bit too much, but it's my go-to now, and I like PowerPoint a lot better than a whole lot of other slideshows out there.
I'm a Google guy, and it's kind of interesting that I taught at a school, Muskingum University, where they're Microsoft. And so I was messing around with PowerPoint, and I was like, geez, I guess this does have some features that Google Slides can't touch. And then I realized how easy it was to upload a PowerPoint to YouTube, and I was like, this is perfect for flip presentations. So I've used it a lot. So have you done a flip presentation yet with PowerPoint?
I have. I've done quite a few, actually, since you also introduced me to HyperDocs.
Oh, yeah.
So I've used those as well. I mean, that was probably one of the most valuable conversations I had last year was the one with you, because it tweaked just enough of what I do to make it a little bit more different, and especially in a time where we went, a month after we talked, I was back online again.
HyperDocs was perfect for virtual learning. It was perfect. Yeah. It was just like a little menu option. Check these boxes, and they just look cool.
Yeah, and they do, and they don't require a lot of work. It can all be tweaked and everything. So it's I use both.
I interviewed the HyperDocs girls. I wouldn't call them girls unless they called themselves girls, believe me. But I interviewed the HyperDocs girls, it's been a number of years ago. What a brilliant concept. Why can't I think of things like that? And just like, oh, well.
Well, you think of so many other things.
Well, thank you.
So let them do that. And, I did want to say that, and I got your hacking, classroom strategy hacking or whatever it's called, the book you wrote.
Oh, you're talking about hacking engagement.
Hacking engagement. There you go. Yes, and it is my goal this year to use one of your strategies every week.
That bless your heart, man. I'm going to have to have you come on again. So I got to ask you this, because I don't know the answer. So you're living in Denmark, but you're from the Lone Star State of Texas.
Yep.
Give us a point A to point B story.
Very quickly, when I was in high school, junior in high school, I was an exchange student here in Denmark.
Ooh.
And changed my life. I came back to visit a few times. I did a study abroad here in college, and then I decided to come and try to get my college degree here, just to kind of get it out of my system. That was the idea.
Mm-hmm.
And then I just stayed. I kept, I got my bachelor's, and I went and got my master's. I met my husband, and sometimes I like to say I'm stuck, but I'm still here. So
What's the book? Like Hygge or Hygge or something like? Well, that was a book about Denmark. What was the name of that thing?
Well, there's a book out called Hygge.
That's it. I read that book. I liked that book. I thought
it's all about the coziness of Denmark. It is a Danish word that you can't really translate.
No, I can't even say it. It's Hygge?
Yeah, Hygge.
And one thing that was funny is I taught with a young woman who was considering moving to Denmark as well.
Wow.
One thing that they said in that book was that Danes are kind of cliquish, that they get like a small friend group, and it's kind of hard to break in as an outsider. Did you find that?
Danes are more reserved. I don't know if they're cliquish in that respect, but they're more reserved. They're not as open and welcoming as Americans are.
Right.
But once you get an in, once you have a friend, then you're pretty much set for life. They're very loyal friends.
Well, that's cool.
So
that's awesome.
So it might be a little bit more difficult to meet unless you're drinking beer. Then everything's easier.
Ha! This is funny because people are, they're driven by similar things wherever you are. And I remember a lady from down south, as in the United States, who was a friend of mine who didn't like New Yorkers because she said they were so rude. And I thought, at least with New Yorkers, you know where you stand. They're going to be very upfront. Where sometimes, some of the Southern culture, it's like, I'm not sure that person really likes me, even though they're being very nice to me. So,
well, I guess New Yorkers and Danes probably have a lot in common then.
Yeah, very good, very good. Well, we could talk about that too much. I need to move on here. I'm so fascinated by this question because, You are an expert at being a student in America and being a teacher in Denmark. Were you ever a teacher in the U.S.?
No.
Okay.
Never taught in the U.S.
But you have lots of school experience in the United States, and you have family and friends in the U.S. How are schools different in Denmark or Europe, for that matter? How are they different?
Well, in Denmark especially, we students have a lot of autonomy, and the ideas of tests are not as common and not as used as they are in the States.
Right.
Grading is more on a comprehensive scale rather than based on individual assignments.
That sounds magnificent.
At the end of, I teach English, and I teach English at B level, which is the second highest level, and at A level. So after 2 years in high school, you complete your B level education or your B level English, and you have an exam at the end of the year. And that exam is your grade. So, and it's an oral exam and a written exam. So you get 2 grades. Now, you also get grades from the teacher as an end of the year grade or an end of the course grade.
Yeah.
But your final exam can change your average, because that's you're evaluated on your presentation that day based on 2 years of teaching.
Wow, that's a lot of pressure on that event, isn't it?
There is a lot of pressure, but it gives the student the opportunity to really demonstrate their skills as well as their knowledge.
Now, does that student have a chance to revise, or is it just like a one-shot deal?
It's pretty much a one-shot deal. They go in and they'll draw it's kind of like a lottery.
Yeah.
And they'll pick a text, and that will be the text that determines pretty much. Now, this is in English. It's a little bit different in other subjects, but it could be an article or a piece of fiction or an excerpt from a short story, and that will be the basis for their oral exam.
Now, you said that they have a lot of autonomy.
Yeah.
What do you mean by that?
That means they Danish students are often involved in how the teaching and learning takes place. We, I think we're pretty good at in taking the students' interests and desires and goals into consideration when developing the curriculum. There are, of course, standards and skills that we have to include, but especially in English, we have a whole lot of freedom.
Now, do you think that Danish teenagers seem more mature to you than Americans?
That's a good question, because in many ways, yes, I would say high school students are probably a little bit more mature, but they're also a little bit older when they graduate.
Yeah.
So high school ends around the age of 19, 20, maybe 21 for some.
Okay.
So, and academically, they're also a little bit further along. It's pretty much similar to the first year and a half of college in the U.S.
What's the drinking age?
That's a funny question. There is no drinking age.
That's what I thought. Now, in Germany, isn't it like 16 or so?
Yeah, but in Denmark, there's a drinking or an alcohol buying age. So you can't purchase alcohol until you're 16 or 18 years old, depending on if it's beer or if it's hard alcohol. But there's no real limit on when you can drink it. If your parents say fine, then there's no problem.
So there's another example of where the kids are given autonomy and
absolutely.
And from your observation standpoint, they seem to handle it pretty darn well. I
think so. I mean, they're high school students, so there's a level of immaturity, and there's also a level of partying that sometimes goes with their immaturity. But by the time they graduate, they're in general they're pretty solid kids. So.
Interesting. And I asked about Europe. Would you say that the Danish model is not unusual for European countries?
I think it's not unusual maybe for Northern European countries, but I think the further south that you get in Europe, I think there's a more authoritarian
Sure.
way of teaching.
Huh.
So I think when you get to France and to Italy, that's a little bit different. But
I love the way
Northern
you
Europe,
phrase that, a more authoritarian way of teaching. That's awesome. All right. Now you have
yeah.
some, you have to go to my show notes, folks. I know that I keep harping on that, but that's where you find really great links. And I was really bummed because Jennifer and I were interacting last week, and she had this workshop. And I think the workshop's going to take place tomorrow, correct?
That's correct.
And I don't think, and like this is a time warp situation. I don't think I'm going to have well, I know I'm not going to have the podcast ready until at least 24 hours. And so we're going to talk a little bit about this workshop. What's it called?
It's called the Back to School reEntry Workshop.
Right. So everybody's like saying, "Oh boy, I have to actually do this again. I have
Yeah.
to."
And let me just tell you, James, I've thought about that, the fact that the workshop is going to be taking place before this podcast airs, and that's perfectly fine because I'll do it again for anybody out there listening to us today.
Awesome.
I'll send you a link for
Yeah.
next Wednesday.
Sure.
And if anybody wants to come on an extra live, then I'll be happy to do that.
And I liked your
So-
bullet points. I put them on my notes here. Create intentional space. Reestablish classroom norms. Define what normal means to you. Reignite your passion for teaching. That's beautiful, man. Talk about any of those.
Well, the thing is I found out just kind of haphazardly that a lot of schools do not really have a reentry plan for teachers.
No.
There's a reentry plan for students.
Right.
Because students, there's a gap. This corona chaos has created a gap for students in their academic learning and some of their social and emotional learning as well.
Right.
There is a clear plan for schools because they still have to adhere to rules, guidelines. You know, there are still hand sanitizers, distancing, masks, depending on where you are in the world.
Right.
But there are no real reentry plans for teachers. We're just part of the whole, I guess, lava flow that goes with it, but we're not directed and we're not really being taken into consideration how this past corona chaos has affected us.
Yeah.
And how we best can get back into the classroom. I feel that in many ways, teachers are just expected to just pick up all the pieces and run.
Right.
And literally run because everything is back to normal, but it's not normal.
No. And, that's so interesting that you say that because I think that I read in your notes back to me that you were in the audience in the What's Best for Kids
Yeah. Great show.
conference that I was a part of last week, and I think I made that point that it's not going to be the same. That
Not at all.
That COVID changes people. And now I made an analogy, which one of the ladies that I was on the panel with liked. I said this is kind of like a war, like everybody's involved, and it impacts everyone's lives, and it impacts the economy. People passed away as a result. Loved ones passed away. It's very similar to a war.
Oh, yeah.
But I use this example, like World War II, for instance, was a calamity. I mean, hundreds of millions of people dead. But out of that calamity, some really neat things came about, like antibiotics, computers, jet aircraft, radar, all these things that are incredibly useful. So I think that educators need to take the attitude that, hey, I did some things during COVID that worked pretty well.
Yeah, exactly.
Maybe I will incorporate that when I'm back in in-person instruction. So I think what you're doing here is really good because you're getting teachers to think about themselves and their feelings about going back, as opposed to just always being student-centered. I mean, if you're not, there's an old saying, if mama ain't happy, ain't nobody's happy. Well, let's let's get teachers in a good place so they can be great educators.
And I think it's really important that teachers recognize that they need this, and if their schools aren't doing it and there's no plan in action, then we as individuals can make our own plan and decide within all of the parameters that we have how we are going to look at things, how are we going to act, what are we going to place as most important and least important. Which of these corona techniques will we take with us?
Yeah.
And which of them we're just going to throw in the trash because they're just not for us. So I think it's really good if we have that mindset that we decide how we are going to be in the classroom.
I love that. And I'll tell you what, anybody out there that's the least bit anxious about going back to school, I want you to go to my show notes and you can interact with Jennifer Burke-Hansen. And she's a very approachable person who's going to help you game plan for this incredible event that's coming real quick. Hey, when do you guys start school in Denmark?
Oh man, my first students show up on Friday.
Oh my gosh, that's ridiculous.
Yeah, so that's less than 48 hours away. I'll be in the classroom.
Oh my gosh, that's crazy.
So I've got my reentry plan ready to go.
Hey, you want to hear something funny, Jennifer? I am teaching a technology class this fall, and my wife is going to be in the class.
Hilarious.
I know. She better behave herself.
Yeah, I would. I'd be a little bit wary. She'd probably be asking questions all the time. I know my husband would do that if he was in my class.
Well, fortunately, it's virtual. So what's going to be funny is I'm going to be in one room, she's going to be in another room, and then the other students are going to be, all over the place. But I might just kind of walk over and do this, like wave in her camera to the other students, and they'll be like, "What? They're in the same place."
What?
Oh well.
Oh, that'll be fun.
So let's talk about your blog. So you have a blog, and this blog is called reEnchanted Teacher.
reEnchanted Teaching, yeah.
reEnchanted Teaching. I'm sorry, reEnchanted Teaching. First of all, where'd you come up with that moniker? What was the motivation behind that? And then tell me about your blog.
Well, I started as an independent instructional coach, and that's really what I want to do is help teachers to reignite their passion for teaching when they get to that close to burnout, but not quite in any burnout phase. Yeah. And I don't know, it just came to me one day. I thought, to be re-enchanted with your work is magical, and teaching is very magical. It can be like having a wonderful spell being cast, or it could be an ominous spell being cast sometimes. But there is a sense of magic, at least I think so, in teaching. So if I can help teachers to become re-enchanted with their teaching, then I would, that's just great, because that in the end will make students re-enchanted with their learning.
Sure. And I'll bet you have experienced this a number of times in your career. You go in and you do a lesson, and man, you're just in the zone, and the kids are with you, and they're excited, and the class period ends, and they walk out, and you walk out, and you feel like $1,000,000, man. You just feel so energized and so awesome, and so glad you're a teacher, and I say that. And I do this podcast, I've wrote a couple books and all that stuff, but I had times when, midway through my career where I'm thinking, geez, I could make more money, I could get more stimulation, I'm doing the same thing every year. I mean, I suffered from what you're talking about. And I consider myself a pretty enthusiastic guy.
Well, I think every teacher does, because this kind of, we work with people. Mm-hmm. And people are not always the same. You can leave that class that you just talked about feeling so wonderful, like this is the only thing you're meant to do.
Right.
And then walk into the next class after lunch, and it's crazy. And by the time you're done with that class, you think, I got to find a new job, because this is crazy.
No kidding.
And that kind of roller coaster is what makes it extremely exciting, but can also be a bit difficult to navigate sometimes.
Yep, you got it. Now, I have a link on my show notes to number one, your blog, but number two, a post.
Yes.
And this is redefine your normal.
Yeah.
Talk about that post.
That was inspired by, I read in a Facebook group somewhere that somebody was feeling a bit apprehensive about going back to school and in the classroom after COVID, but was really excited about getting back to normal.
Yeah.
And I thought, I don't think there is a normal anymore.
No kidding.
And I really think that that you have to redefine it and take where we're at and how we will approach things in the future and what we think about things and define normal from that perspective and not from pre-COVID, because and like you said, it's like a war. It's never going to be the same.
No.
We are forever going to be marked by this period of time. And I think if we keep hoping that things will get back to normal, I think we'll all be disappointed.
Yes, I love that. And who's to say they can't be better? I mean,
Exactly.
I mean, are you familiar with Carol Dweck and the growth mindset?
I've seen her twice. She's
Well, that's
amazing.
Awesome. So, I mean, teachers promote the growth mindset to their students constantly.
Yeah.
I've done it. My colleagues have done it. We need to not be hypocrites. We need to embrace that thing that we're encouraging our students to embrace. We need to embrace a growth mindset about the way we teach kids, and that could be influenced by some positive experience we had during COVID. I can tell you that, and I mentioned this last week in that panel, that I've heard people say, I never want to be on another Zoom call for the rest of my life. But what I had a class of 20 students, and I tried to have a classroom discussion on Zoom, and, a lot of them were tuned out. And so I broke it into smaller chunks. I had a Zoom call with 5 students, recorded it, and then the other 15 students were required to watch it and write a reflection. That was a darn good way to have a class discussion. I wouldn't have thought of that if I wasn't in the midst of COVID. And I am going to utilize that tactic going forward, regardless of whether it's in person or not.
And I think I really love that idea, and I'll probably steal that one from you too, just like I stole your PowerPoint ideas and your hyperdocs. But because that true connection that you can make with those 5 students at a time,
right?
Those relationship building skills that you have when you're one-on-one or 5-on-1, then that will play out in so many different ways in the classroom. If you can do that with, 4 or 5 different groups of 5 during a semester, and because you cannot replace those relational those relationships that you build. You cannot do that. And I think Zoom or Google Meet or whatever platform that you use, it gives you that opportunity to do that regardless of where you are.
And Jennifer, I want to add one thing that's kind of interesting. I think one of the things that students liked about learning during COVID was the on-demand nature of things. Like, hey, I can watch a presentation for 10 minutes, take a break, come back to it. It's not like I'm in a room listening at one time. If I miss something, I've missed it. So the other students who weren't involved, that weren't like part of the 5 that were in the discussion, liked the freedom of watching it on their own time, and then and then writing their reflection based on, they'll do it at 3 a.m. You know how kids are; they'll just stay up all night. But that's a good example of something that I just did, just kind of on the fly, to try to make things work during COVID, which actually was pretty cool, and I'm going to keep doing it.
Yeah, well, I mean, I had similar experiences with, I'm also a student counselor, so sometimes I don't really have the opportunity to engage in a discussion with a student after class because there are still other students around, and you don't want to call somebody in But through a chat and a Zoom call, I could say to them, just stay on the line after class and let's have a chat.
Great point, man. Great point.
And I talked to some students who seemed to be struggling a little bit that I otherwise would not have been able to do.
Right.
Because it would not be apparent, and it would be they wouldn't appreciate me getting in their face in person. So
and also I bet that you were not like in a hectic atmosphere like a school can be. And you could really communicate with them in a relaxed way. And they were probably more relaxed being at home, talking to you. That's interesting, man. That's good. Now, look, we've talked about a lot of neat things in this podcast, but I want you to lay on listeners one outstanding piece of advice as they're going back, as they're heading back to the salt mine.
Well, I think it's kind of just a recap of some of the things we've talked about. I like to leave with two really important things.
Yeah.
One is that it is really important to embrace what you can take with you from COVID.
Right.
And put that into action.
That's so important. That's so important.
It is. As part of your reentry, go back into the classroom knowing what your boundaries are, knowing what you're taking with you and what you're not. And then redefine what you used to call normal. Everything that you do from now on has a different take, and make it your new normal, or your better normal, or your call it something completely different then. Because Jennifer, I think that's really important.
That's outstanding, because you're right. I mean, it's not going to be the same, even if we try to make it the same, because my prediction is that some students are going to feel pretty claustrophobic sitting in a classroom during a set time, and everybody's getting instructed at the same time. You have to take notes or whatever. I think that they might struggle with the regimentation of going back to in-person instruction. That's just pure speculation on my part. But if you take the attitude that you are promoting, then you can look at that and say, oh, okay, well, they might have liked certain aspects of learning under COVID. How can I incorporate those in-person instruction? I think that'd be beautiful, man.
Well, I think, too, that, a new normal, at least for the next couple of years, is going to be this need to differentiate in our classrooms so much more than before, because we really don't know what students are coming back with.
Ugh,
they're coming back at various levels. Some students have been really strong in the online world, and other students have fallen off the grid.
They've just disappeared, man.
And they're all coming back, and we have to embrace that.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a new normal in a much larger scale than we're used to. And if we just accept that, instead of trying to put everything back into a box that we had before, that was nice, neat, and we understood it, then I think it'll be a lot easier.
More individual, less institutional.
Yes. Maybe a little bit Danish then.
Beautiful. Hey, I have to ask you one last question. So, in Texas, when you were growing up, Friday nights were a pretty big deal, right? Go to the football game?
Oh, yeah.
Danish kids don't play for school sports, do they?
No, we don't have sports in schools.
Isn't that interesting?
It is.
For better or for worse, right?
Yeah, it's completely different. Sports are all in clubs.
Yeah. Now, do you find that there's as much pride in your school as say when you were back in Texas?
Oh no, that kind of school pride is not the same. It's students are proud of their schools, but it is purely from a more social and a more academic perspective.
That is fascinating. That is utterly fascinating, man. Well, look, you are so interesting.
Well, thank you. You are too.
and I want people to be able to get a hold of you, and my audience. I shame them to go to my my show notes, but I don't think they do it. So you got to give them some contact information. Lay it on.
Well, yeah. Well, they can reach me through my website, reEnchantedteaching.com. So pretty easy, and they can reach me, through that with my email. I can give you the link there.
Yeah.
And info@reEnchantedteaching.com. So those are a couple of links, and I will give you the link to the workshop, which I said in the beginning that I'll be happy to put it on again next week for any of your listeners that are out there. So those are some easy ways. I'm on Facebook. I'm technically on Instagram. Haven't quite figured out Instagram yet.
Yeah.
And
I really can't figure it out either. I meant to post something that I liked a whole bunch of stuff. I must be showing my age, man. Hey, what's one great goal you have for this fall? Something that you're going to do that you're really excited about?
Well, aside from getting this workshop out running, and I'm really looking forward to becoming working as an instructional coach independently.
Sure.
And we're going to be having an exchange student this year, so it's going to be quite exciting in our household. So that's a little bit different. And I've got a couple of races coming up. I'm not an avid runner, but I do like to. There's a castle race, a race around a castle in September on my birthday. So I'm going to be doing that on September 5th.
You go get him, man. Go get him. Go get him for the Lone Star State.
I will.
Thank you so much, Jennifer.
It's been a pleasure, James. Anytime.
So here we are at the What You Can Do Tomorrow section, and the problem's simple. Teachers might be anxious about going back to the classroom after COVID, and the solution is to redefine your normal. And here's some steps you can take. Check out Jennifer's links on the show notes, and then make a list of aspects of virtual instruction tactics or tools that worked well for you when you were doing virtual instruction. Brainstorm ways to incorporate these concepts into in-person instruction. In this episode, Jennifer and I mentioned how many teachers promote the growth mindset. This fall will provide educators with a magnificent opportunity to walk the walk, baby. Hey, good luck tomorrow engaging your kids.
Show notes for this episode can be found at jamesalansturnevant.com. If you enjoy Hacking Engagement, please subscribe, rate, and review us on iTunes.